right, so here's a message for you, Paul. I'm so glad you're on our side. Thank you. Thank you for turning good. So I think just to extend on all the different sessions that you've been at today, it's really about the fact that when we talk about security, it's hard, it's difficult. There isn't a one-shot solution for all. And same thing goes for managed PKI or in-house PKI certificates for that matter. And what I wanted to do was, rather than saying, go, managed PKI certificates, I wanted to give you a balanced perspective. And I think that's a really important piece. So I wanted to be as objective as possible, including the downsides of managed PKIs, as well as in-house. So let me tell you a little story. Do you ever take chances? You know, I traveled quite a bit. I actually spoke in New York yesterday at Razorfish Tech Summits, and I flew in today to speak here as well. So I often have to handle a lot of hotel bookings myself sometimes, if it's not handled by the organizer. Well, I went to one of those sites where you actually have to bid based on location and price. And all you know is just a rating and just a general geographic area, but you don't know the name of the hotel. Well, guess what? I took a chance. Once my bid was accepted, it revealed the name of the hotel. And what do? I immediately reviewed the hotel, the hotel in terms of the review ratings. And it's one-star reviews everywhere. I'm like, seriously? I got a great price, but at what cost? Now I have to deal with pesky insects, smelly room, rude staff, and broken appliances. And frankly, if I wanted that, I would have just stayed home, right? Well, like any reasonable person would do, I gave the room to my mother-in-law.
Thank you.
God bless her. But when it comes to IoT security, we cannot afford to take a chance. But the reality is, as you heard in the last couple of days, everybody just about is taking a chance one way or another. And right now, those that are actually actively in IoT, they are publishing and subscribing to auto fleets, manufacturing, and environmental sensory data. But what's going to happen is pretty soon, like you've heard, we're going to start to get into really sensitive information like medical information and personal information. And we know they're already at risk. But what I want to share with you today is this. What is PKI? Let's take a look at in-house versus managed, the pros and cons. And let's be honest about the shortcomings and the criticisms with PKI. As well as what are some alternatives, such as open source, that we should be looking at. Again, they are not recommendations, but it just helps inform you, just like what Paul was saying. Do you know the fundamentals? Do you know the foundational aspect to even make an informed decision? And then wrap it up. Let me ask you a question. Do you know how much cybercrime has siphoned off companies and our customers? Any figures? Any figures at all? Well, according to McAfee, 2014 paper entitled "The Net Losses Estimating the Global Cost of Cybercrime," they estimate some upwards of $575 billion lost to cybercrime. And that's significant, and that's only going to grow. And like what Paul was saying, the real threat, aside from just the economic loss, is the terrorist and the political threats that we're exposing ourselves to. More than just the stock hits and the loss in terms of economics, is first and foremost, as you, the delegates of your corporate entities, it's your reputation that you're putting at risk. And when your brand as an identity and a reputation gets tarnished, it is very difficult to bring that back and that trust back. And that's what we're talking about, and that's why it's so important. It's about trust, isn't it? Well, let's talk about the anatomy of data breach here. At our home, we have 3 laptops, 2 iPads, 2 iPhones, Apple TV, iPod, and a host of wearables and connected home devices. And by the way, that sounded like a Christmas song. If just one becomes vulnerable, the entire personal network becomes vulnerable. And then of course, as we heard, not only at the device level, but at the gateway and then eventually to the cloud, and then the cloud's secondary and third API services, everything becomes vulnerable. And as more devices are connected online, companies are going to be exposed to crime in novel ways that we can't even think of. And many industry leaders recognize this, and that's why you're here, and that's why they have sent you here. However, the question is, what are we doing about it? Are we actually taking action? Or are we just informing ourselves with more data? Now, many of us already have seen this slide before, where we anticipate that the growth of IoT is going to be in upwards of 50 to 200 billion devices by 2020. Now, whether that's exaggerated or not, we know that regardless of which analyst you're listening to, it is significant growth. I heard somebody talk about machine learning yesterday and also the projection, and he was saying something to the extent of the data in the last 2 years is somewhat like 90 to 95% of all the data that has ever been generated by computers. So that growth curve is just incredible. And with that, it increases the potential for potential on-the-line security authentication needs to be really a priority for corporations, because otherwise we're going to have breaches down to the electronically verifiable device level, at the model level, or at the serial number level. Just like you could crash a drone, you could crash a car, you could crash a lot of things. And you have to establish trust across these connected devices on a massive scale is a significant industry challenge. Matter of fact, again, going back to what Jason said, we're part of the All-Seeing Alliance, and we're advocating and saying to these consortiums and alliances, we have to, at the manufacturing OEM, at the product level, need to really think about this, not only from an interoperability standpoint, but from an industry standard standpoint. Whether it's from devices, networks, the cloud, or the back-end servers, down to the databases. And so we know that IoT is going to breed malicious surveillance and attacks. It's going to be the next big economy, isn't it? PKI certificates. Well, any enterprise ecosystem consists of resources and individuals, right? Well, PKI, or public key infrastructure certificates, can address the technological end, firm up and enforce policies, and emphasize security, to a point. The expansion of IoT accentuates the direct relationship between keeping devices and data secure and giving customers peace of mind. Well, securing IoT networks and ecosystem through PKI certificates is an important piece of that equation, but it by no means it is the answer, not at all, but it's a piece of it. And it's referring to the entire ecosystem devoted to digital certificates and encryption. And this involves people, frankly, as well as in terms of the digital certificates, software and hardware. And it's issued from a CA, or a certificate authority, who creates and then manages the system. And there's a unique identifier, right? And it helps to create trusting relationships between customers and businesses. Now, from algorithm perspective, in terms of cryptology, most of us are familiar with RSA, which is based on MIT researchers Rivest, Shamir, and Adaman. Well, today we use more of the elliptical curve cryptography, which is more based on the algebraic curve, and it's been garnering a lot more interest and usage because of its ability to be much more secure than RSAs. X.509 digital certificates have also gained quite a bit of traction because they represent an identity across platform, cross-organization. Where the developers can choose from a myriad of certificate processing software libraries. Some are built into the OS, others such as OpenSSL and Bouncy Castle are available for free as an example. And these certificates are attractive in that these certificates do not need to be publicly trusted or purchased from a big box certificate vendor. They can be, frankly, issued by any of your organizations in-house. And that makes it very scalable, right? From that perspective, especially if you think about accounting for the growth in IoT, whether it's millions or billions. Now, when you're thinking about an in-house approach versus a managed approach, things to keep in mind is sometimes doing it all in-house sounds great in many ways, and it's certainly scalable, but then you start to run up against some other issues, right? Because in-house solutions requires having certain dedicated staff, certain know-how, and as you start to grow very rapidly as a company and your service offerings, you're gonna have to deal with more locations, more resources, more employees, and it starts to become a job in itself just to maintain this in-house. Now, there's a SANS Institute report called The Business Perspective on PKI, why many PKI implementations fail and success factors to consider when you are looking at a PKI implementation. And what's really interesting is that the findings show that they're really fundamentally not technical in nature, but it's actually non-technical. Because whenever we talk about an organization and an enforcement of such PKI certificates and policies, we're ultimately talking about people, right? And people really are not a system. And they're going to behave in ways that perhaps may not necessarily always abide by the policies. Or can you automatically and systematically regulate their behavior, even with the best training? Now, what about the customers? Well, the customers, how are they taking the threat of connected devices and IoT? Well, it really depends on how much they care about making sure that a corporate reputation is retained and protected. Well, Don John's The Shortcut Guide to Certificates in the Enterprise highlights that the trust issue of going with in-house PKIs. It's hard to make an argument that an entirely internal PKI is a good solution for producing certificates that must be trusted by the public. And attesting to your own identity isn't exactly going to generate a lot of trust among your users and your customers. So let's talk a little bit about managed PKI certificates. Well, certainly it makes a lot of sense to go into managed certificates from a business perspective because it's so lucrative. It doesn't cost tremendously a lot to be able to support it, but you can actually start to charge quite a bit, and it's scalable. So it's not surprising that, I'm not going to mention the names, a lot of big firms are aggressively targeting this space. Now, if in fact the analysts' predictions are going to really get into this scale, right, it's just going to be incredible, and you're going to see a huge saturation in this space. Now, customers want to know that wearables, everything from wearables, connected homes, connected cars, connected Internet of Things, that these things are safe, right, from being from unauthorized access. And corporations need to know that wearable fitness bands that Phil at your work is wearing isn't going to potentially jeopardize the entire network and cost you millions of dollars in damages. Managed PKI certificates do have a role in that they help ensure systematically a reasonable amount of security and shelter from liability. And they do offer some valuable in the sense that they come as a package solution where they provide you certain operational setups, certificate security, the initial rollout and support, right? So that they get to focus on what they do best and allows you to focus on your core competency in terms of having to manage this in-house aspect of PKI management. But ultimately, again, I'm not necessarily advocating for managed PKIs at all. I'm actually saying you have to understand both the pros and cons of in-house as well as the managed side and ask yourself and your colleagues at work, what is the right solution for us? And the life cycle of your product or service, or you as a company, or you as an entity in terms of the maturity of your company. All right, so let's talk about some of the shortcomings not everyone is a fan of PKI certificates. Now, when my kids were younger, they often told knock-knock jokes. Who's there? Right? Well, knock-knock, who's there? Grandpa. Crap, somebody stopped the funeral. Right? Well, sometimes the people at the door may not be who they say they are. Or even if they are who they say they are, they may not be authorized to do certain things. For example, I have Johnny who lives next door. He comes to me and says, I'm Johnny. Okay, well, I know who you are. He says, well, I'd like to borrow the key to your Porsche, your new Porsche. Am I going to hand him the keys? Oh yeah, of course. Here you go, kid. Wreck it. I don't like the color anyways. Well, some of the concerns raised by security experts is that who do we trust? And for what specific purpose? And what makes that CA trusted? See, the notion of trusted means that it's able to handle its own private keys, right? Well, this doesn't mean that others can necessarily trust a certificate from that CA or for a specific purpose. In other words, who gave the CA the authority to grant such authorization? And who made it trusted? I mean, these are good questions. Another issue is in signing your own private signing key. Who is using the key, and how do you really know that it's protected? Now, whether it's sitting on your network, or your computer, smart card, or device, I mean, the reality is it's vulnerable to an attack. And if somebody gets a hold of it, of your private signing key, and causes harm, who is legally responsible? Believe it or not, it's actually you. And they don't actually even have to prove fault. That can be very scary. What about the verifying computers that are using the certificates? How secure are those computers? Certificate verification does not use secret key, but they use a public key or public keys. And because there are no secrets to protect, it means that if someone were to actually get a hold of one of the root public keys, they can actually append their own in terms of adding to the public key and add their own certificate and give the indication that, frankly, it's a legitimate certificate. And it's not very difficult to do. And then numerous other issues that needs to be thought through, from unique identifiers to the identifier in terms of the CA authority. Is a user part of the security design? And how did the CA identify the certificate holder? I mean, host of issues that, frankly, the answers are, frankly, not very satisfactory. So the point here is that security is a chain. It's not the entire solution, and it's only as strong as its weakest link. And the security of any CA-based system is based on many links, and it's not all cryptographic, as long as people are involved, and we know that. The point is that PKI certificates, whether it's in-house or managed, is not the solution to all your security concerns or matters. Vendors want to make you think that if you purchase their managed PKI certificate service, that all your problems disappear. And the reality is far from the truth. And again, this talk isn't about teaching you something that's new to you, but it should be about something that helps you to have a balanced perspective. So what are some alternatives to vendor-managed solutions? Well, how about open source? So Red Hat, most of you are familiar with, is a provider of open source software products to enterprises. And of course, they make their money on the consulting and the support side. Well, they have a product called the Red Hat Certificate System that manages the public key infrastructure. And it provides something that's scalable, secure, as we expect from them. And the exciting thing about that is that they provide a full lifecycle management, from the ability to issue, renew, suspend, revoke, and to archive and recover, with single or dual key X.509 version 3 certificates, and be able to handle single sign-ons as well as secure communications. Now, if you're wanting more information, you simply have to go to their website and take a look at their product section on the documentation page for more information and documentation. Another one, and we haven't actually looked into this too deeply, but it's available for you to research, is called EJBCK, PKI by PrimeKey. They are OSI certified open source and common criteria evaluation assurance level 4 certified. And as you expect, they do have most of the common features, such as multiple CAs, levels of CAs within one instance, unlimited number of root CAs, sub-CAs, and they follow the standards such as X509, PKIs standards, as well as support RSA and DSA key algorithms. So given the fact that it's 5:15 p.m. and the question is, why are you still here? The conclusion is that security is difficult to understand. It's hard to implement, and frankly, there are no shortcuts. And Jason and others that are experts in this field know this. And for you and your corporate entities to be successful in this, it's really important to get the foundational pieces right. And as IoT expands, frankly, no company can afford to be in a position where they're vulnerable to risk, especially if they know about it, right? So again, PKI Certificates is a component of that value chain, but it's important for you to assess it for yourselves in terms of what is the right approach, and then right-size it for your organization, recognizing that there are flaws, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses. Angela Keith highlights in her SANS Institute paper, Common Issues in PKI Implementation, Climbing the Slope of Enlightenment. She says that PKI is not perfect, but that there's a sizable number of governing bodies and corporations and individuals trying to tackle this issue and to make some tangible contribution in terms of improving the implementation of PKIs. So they're trying as an industry. So here's a question for you. Knock, knock. Who's there?